A very good day to Puan Maziani. My name is Yeo Ying Sheng from Group 44, and today I will explain about the project Hospital Billing System. It is upgraded to process the bills for many patients during their checkout from a hospital. There are a few functions which we have included in this program: the main menu, the input, the call category, the call each patient charges, find highest and find lowest. I'll explain about this function one by one. The first one is main menu. So essentially what main menu does is that it actually displays the main menu. The user can choose one of these options and it will bring the user to another interface. We skip this function first and come back to it later, but we talk about call category. So what call category does? Call category function, it actually calculates and returns the total charges of each category of hospital stay, surgery, medication, and services separately, which means for each of these category, it actually sums up the charges for all the patients in hospital stay. So if hospital stay, we calculate the sum for hospital stay only, and if it's surgery, we calculate the surgery charges only. And the next one is the function call each patient charges. So what it does is that it actually calculates and returns the sum of hospital stay charges, surgery charges, medication charges, and service charges for each patient separately. For each patient, because we have the num here, so num has 0, 1, 2. So 0, it represents the first patient, 1 represents the second patient, and if third, it represents the third patient. It returns the sum of overall charges for each patient. And the next one is the find highest function, returns the subscript of the patient with the highest bill. So the subscript will be used later to be compared with the array of patient names to find the patient with the highest bill. The same thing goes to find lowest. It returns the array subscript of the lowest bill. In here we initialize the 1D parallel arrays. So we have the parallel arrays, this one, hospital stay, meals, surgery, medication, services. We actually store different types of contents in that. Let's say in that, so in these arrays we actually stored different types of contents in that array. So for meals, we actually get them so these arrays for now, they are actually empty, and we need to input from this text file into these arrays. So as an example, we have the medication. So medication, for this array, it will store the name of different type of medication, and the medication cost, it stores the cost of each medication. This patient name array is actually storing the name of each patient. We actually dynamically allocate, so the following arrays are dynamically allocated with memory so that the addresses of these arrays can be passed as arguments to another function, because we want to manipulate each element in the array without passing back the array. And then the arrays are used to store the charges of each category. So as an example, surgery charge patient num stores the charges of this category for each patient. So let's say the subscript 0, we store the surgery charge for the first patient, and the subscript 1, we store the surgery charge for the second patient, and so on. And this is just a normal array which we want to store the total patient charge for all the categories for each patient num. So let's say if it is subscript 0, is the total patient charge for all categories for the first patient. So what this for loop does is that it actually uses the patient num as a limit. It will loop as many times as the number of patients to be checked out from the hospital. In here, we get the information where we call the input function. One thing to note here is that the hospital stay charge, we actually pass the address that is pointed by the pointer, because we initialize this as a pointer array just now. So we want to pass this into this function. So if initially I is equal to 0, because we follow this for loop, we plus I, which is the first element, because it remains at 0. And if it plus 1, which means it is the second patient, we will input the details of the second patient in this function. We want to iterate this for loop as many times as the number of days that the patient has stayed in hospital. The meal of that patient for each day is asked and determined. So here we want to determine the meal received by the patient each day, and we want to add all of the meals charges together with the hospital stay. This actually calculates the total number of days for all patients, and the hospital stay charge, which is each of the element or in this array, will be multiplied with the duration. And then we have the hospital stay charge, which we have multiplied with this. The result will then be added together with the charge of each meal. So if the patient they choose second choice, which is number 2, this will be called, and if the third choice, this will be called. So in input function, we open the file input file, the file name it actually is in accordance with, because we pass the file name as parameter. This text file we use to input the contents of each text file into each array, which we have passed as parameter here. So the array parameter, we actually store each type of category, each content of each type of category, and this cost, we actually store the cost of each thing in each category. And here we want to step through the array and print out as menu for interactive purpose. This expression is actually very important because it places each of the charges of categories of hospital stay, surgery, medication, and service into different array. Let's say for this surgery charge, for example, the subscript 0 of this array, it actually represents the first patient. So it stores the surgery charge for the first patient, and for the subscript 1, it stores the surgery charge for the second patient, and so on. So this section, it displays a summary of payment of each patient. Initially, the program will prompt the user to enter the number of patients. So for example, if the number of patients is 4, we enter, and then it will prompt the user to enter the first patient's name. So if the first patient name, let's say we have John Lee as the first patient, enter, and then it brings us to the patient billing menu, where there are 5 choices and the user has to pick one of them first. So let's say the patient actually stays in the hospital, we choose number 1, and then we have to enter the number of days that the patient has stayed in the hospital. So let's say the patient has stayed there for 5 days, and then it will bring us to another interface, which is the types of rooms. So the program will prompt the user to enter the types of room that the patient stay in. Let's say the patient stayed in a 2-bedded room, so number 4. So for this, the situation is a bit unique. If a patient stays there for 4 days, it will prompt the user to enter this question 4 times. So if 5 times, we have to enter 5 times. So in this case, let us enter the set A, number 1, and let's say the second day the patient had set B, number 2, and the third day he had set C, number 3, and the fourth day the patient had set A, and the fifth day, since we actually entered 5 days just now, so it will prompt the user to enter this 5 times for each day, and we enter. So the next one, if the patient actually had undergone the types of surgery, pick 2, and it brings us to this interface where it asks the user to pick one surgery, and if the patient actually underwent hip replacement surgery, enters 2, and it will brings us out to the main menu again. So if the patient has underwent another surgery again, you can just pick number 2 again. So he can pick, maybe he had spine surgery, so number 1. So this time it brings us to the interface again. So if the doctor has prescribed the patient a type of medication, he can choose number 3, and we have a total of 6 choices here, so he can pick either one of these. But remember, if the patient actually has multiple type of medication, so after picking one of them, brings the patient back to the interface, the patient can choose number 3 again, and maybe he was given paracetamol. So now for the types of services, it's the same thing. Pick number 4. Maybe the patient has underwent a blood test. So after the blood test, maybe he has underwent another kind of services. So number 4, he pick maybe X-ray. So pick number 1. So after we click checkout to check out the first patient, it brings us to another interface where we have to enter the second patient's name. So maybe the second patient's name is Ali, and we enter. Maybe Ali stays in the hospital for 2 days and he picked the single standard room. And maybe for the first day he had set A as his meals, and the second day he had set C as his meals. And let's say if he doesn't have anything else to do, maybe he didn't receive surgery but he received medication, so choose number 3, paracetamol, and if he doesn't have anything left, he can just pick checkout. And now we have to enter the information of the third patient. So the third patient, maybe the third patient name is Jenny, and we click enter. So the hospital stays, maybe she stayed there for 5 days. So, and then we have a 4-bedded room, and maybe for the first day she had set A number. The second day she had set A again, number 3 she had set A again, and number 4 she had set C, and set B for the 5th day. Yep. And if she had undergone the surgery, pick number 2, so she can pick number 6, the kidney stone removal surgery. And lastly, she can pick 5 to check out. And now we have 4th patient's name, and maybe the name is Mohammed Abu. So enter. So now I'm going to explain in terms of the file processing. So let's say we have types of surgery. So after we enter types of surgery, this is actually displayed. But how is it actually displayed? We actually have the file operation here. So let's say we have the surgery. So this is actually in accordance with the list of surgeries in this notepad, in this text file. And in this text file we actually have the price of each of this surgery. So we can pick number 1, which is the spine surgery, and number 3. So the example for number 3, we have this text file which is medication. So we have paracetamol and so on, which is in accordance with this, and these are the cost RM per dose. And you can pick an option, maybe paracetamol, and if he has nothing to check left, just pick 5 to check out. And this is the overall summary. So the first thing, we actually display the summary of payment for each patient. The first one we entered was actually John Lee. So the payment of John Lee, his hospital stay charges are actually 773, and the surgery charges is this one, medication, service, and the total charges for this patient by adding together all of this, which is true. And next, the payment of Ali, because he was the second person, we enter the name, and the payment of Jenny, and the same goes to Muhammad Abu, the last patient we have entered just now. So realize that we have actually typed in a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 patients at the start of this program. So we had to only iterate through this 4 times, so about 4 patients. And then we have the summary of payment for each category, which means for hospital stay charges, we actually add the hospital stay charges for 773 plus 545 plus 498, and all of this will be equal to the hospital stay charges. And the same goes to surgery charges, medication charges, and service charges. And the summary of overall payment is that patient with the highest bill is actually John Lee, and the lowest bill is Ali. Average hospital stay charges for patient, get the total hospital charges, and we just divide by the number of patients, and in this case is 1, 2, 3, 4 patients. Average stay days, we just use the number of days over the number of patients. The last one, it shows the total charges for all the patients, which means we add all of the payment and we will get a result. Thank you for your attention.